So I think we'll go ahead and begin meditation. I'll offer a brief guiding in, and then we'll be silent until the bell at 8 o'clock. So finding a comfortable posture. Just coming into this present moment. Leaving behind the busyness of the day. Just focusing on being right here, right now. One great ally is the body. The mind easily drifts to the past and the future, but the body is always right here in the present moment. So we can use it as an anchor for our present moment awareness. Touching in with the body, not just experiencing what it's like to be living behind the eyeballs, which is how it often feels, or not just up in the head, but throughout the body, the elbow, the toe. Remembering that there is a body associated with this consciousness. Maybe you're aware of temperature, pressure, sensations, moving, changing. Any tension that you can identify in the body, just allowing it to flow out with the out breath. And then narrowing down this body awareness just to the experience of the breath. And what we're looking for here is not the thought of a breath, the idea, not the concept, not what they taught us in high school about breathing. What we're looking for is the felt sense of this one breath. We're looking for a tactile sensation of air moving across skin. And when you notice that the mind has wandered, no reason to tell a story, no reason to judge your abilities as a meditator. Simply abandon whatever mental activity is underway and return to the breath. So welcome to the Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. My name's Ward Simmons. I'm one of 5 Dharma leaders that rotate responsibility for leading on Wednesday nights. Let me say that if you try to unmute yourself, you will not be successful. So there's nothing wrong with your computer. Many of you know this, but if you want to just see me as the speaker, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a choice for speaker view. And if you want to see all the faces, there's a choice for gallery view. That's a little different on iPads and iPhones. There will be a question and answer period after the talk I'm getting ready to give. If you'd like to submit a question, you can use the chat function and just chat in your question, and I'll try to get to those during the question and answer period. So tonight, when I was thinking about what topic I wanted to speak on, we're all so immersed in this pandemic, and there are a lot of very useful things that can be said about it and that have been said. But I don't know about you, I'm getting a little tired of it. I'm still doing the things I'm supposed to do, but I'm kind of tired of thinking about it. And I thought what I wanted to do tonight was just today, as many of you know, Governor Cooper moved us to phase 2 of North Carolina's reopening. We all have opinions about that, but what's true in this moment is that's what's happening on Friday. And so moving back towards some normalcy, I want to just talk about meditation practice a little bit. And really, I want to take a step back and look at kind of a couple tools that we can use to inform our meditation practice. You know, when we think about it, so let me start by saying that, and many of you know this, but it's important to say it. Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte is a nonprofit, tax-exempt organization, and we're not a religious organization. We're an educational organization. We teach the teachings of the Buddha as he taught them about 2,600 years ago. Most people who follow the teachings of the Buddha are members of the Buddhist religion. But the Buddha did not set out to found a religion. And what he set out to do was to share what he had learned about the way the mind works and how we can live in the world in a way that creates less suffering for ourselves and others. And after his death, the religious overlay was placed on his teachings. But our understanding here at IMC Charlotte is these teachings work equally well for people of any religion or of no religion. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. Now, how do we end up here on this Wednesday night together? Most of us are here because we had an interest in meditation. And coming to this Sangha for meditation is a very good thing to do. And if that's all we ever do, the meditation practice, then our lives will be better for it. So I don't want you to hear me saying that that's not enough. But what I do want to say is there is more if we choose to engage with it. The Buddha's path is more than meditation practice. And when we broaden our view beyond meditation practice, we can see that really the path is a comprehensive way of living our lives in this world. So I want to talk first a little bit about how we move on this path. And then I want to talk about the path itself. So there's a model that I like to use. I think it applies really well to meditation, well, not to meditation, to this path, which is meditation and more. And I found it somewhere along the way, and I kind of adapted it to use on this path. I think it's a psychological model, and somewhere out there is someone who deserves credit for it, but I don't know her name, and so I can't give her credit. But there are two variables that this model takes into account. And one is effort, how much effort we apply. And the second is the skillfulness or lack thereof of our behaviors. So I want to share my screen and just show you a picture of this model. Just one moment. Okay, so can everybody see that? Just hold up your hand and make sure that it's working. Okay, thanks. Let me see if I can get it all on the screen. So what you'll see is there are 4 quadrants here, and they correspond to 4 stages along this path. And in the lower left-hand corner, so that's the gray quadrant, the word that the Buddha used to describe us when we're in this quadrant is the uninstructed worldling. So I kind of like that name. Happy not to be one anymore. But it's someone who has not yet entered the path. And what you'll see on the left is this quadrant is low effort, and up above this quadrant is unskillful thoughts, words, and deeds. So this is the average person that has no interest in pursuing a spiritual path. And one reason a lot of people abide in this quadrant is because it takes very little effort, and that has an appeal. From there, we progress up to the second quadrant. It's tan in color. Now, this is high on effort, so it requires that we exert some effort to move in this direction. This is someone who has entered the path. And while thoughts, words, and deeds might still often be unskillful, now effort is being applied to change that. And this increased effort, one reason it takes effort is we've got long-standing habits that we have to overcome to move out of what we're accustomed to. From there, we move to the right to the blue box labeled number 3. You'll see it's still high effort, but our thoughts, words, and deeds are becoming more skillful. And that's because many of these new behaviors aren't habits yet, and so we still have to have effort. And then, with time, we move into the fourth quadrant, which is somebody who has progressed along the path. This is the green quadrant, and it's still skillful thoughts, words, and deeds. But what you'll notice is the effort is now not as great as what was required. So this is somebody who has achieved some level of mastery on the path. And as these behaviors have become habits, it takes less effort to kind of sustain them. So every model is imperfect, and the truth is we don't progress in nice, neat steps. We aren't in one quadrant yesterday and a different quadrant today. We move around and we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And maybe we're progressing well with one matter, but not another. But it's not the final word on how we progress on the path, but it's just one way of understanding it that might be helpful to supplement other ways that you understand it. Importantly, when we are moving into the heart of this progression, that's when the greatest effort is required. So it can feel like we're working hard and we've been working hard for a while and it's still hard. And so this model helps me see that there is in the end a place where the effort will be less. I'm just not there yet. Now, the second thing, so kind of keeping that model in mind, the second thing I want to talk about is this path of awakening, the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. And some of you are very familiar with it. Some of you less so. And so now I want to just share these 8 steps on this path. Let's see if I can do this successfully a second time. Miracle. So there are 2 different ways this path can be understood. So on the left-hand side of the screen, what you'll see is what I'll call the classical presentation. And what you'll note, so there are these 8 factors broken into 3 groups: the wisdom factors of right view and right intention, the ethical behavior factors of right speech, right action, and right livelihood, and the mind training or meditation group, which is right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And one of the reasons that's given for placing these wisdom factors first is that we have to have at least a little bit of right view and a little bit of the right intention before we enter onto this path. If we don't have those, we're going to be spending our whole lives down in the first quadrant, low effort and unskillful behavior. But when we get some measure of right view and right intention, that motivates us onto the path. But this sequence, in my way of thinking, also has problems with it. For one thing, it places right concentration. So now, if you'll look at factor 8, concentration, places right concentration as the final factor. And that might lead us to wonder if that isn't the culmination of this path. But it's not. The path culminates with the wisdom factors. And concentration and the other mind training factors are a support for the attainment of wisdom. And there are a lot of meditators who have spent months and years and decades pursuing the wisdom, mind training factors, concentration in particular, and not moving beyond that. As a matter of fact, when the Buddha left home on his spiritual quest, and he wandered as an ascetic for 6 years, he studied with 2 renowned concentration teachers, and he became very accomplished with concentration. But in the end, he left both of them because he said, I see this is not the culmination of the path. There is more for me to learn. So a second problem, placing the wisdom factors first, is that except for the preliminary engagement we have with them just to get on the path, this is really not where most people start. And so if we move over to the right-hand side, what's often referred to as the eightfold training, we see a progression that begins with ethical behavior, and then mind training, and finally wisdom. Now, another thing that's true, this is a understanding that's followed the training in the East often, and it's been traditional for centuries. And the understanding is that until one purifies one's ethical behavior, really the mind training, the meditation part, is not available to us. And so it's not unusual for practitioners in the East to spend literally decades. They might be in their 40s or their 50s before they say, well, now I'm ready to undertake meditation. There's even a different twist. Now I'm going to take this down off the screen. There's even a different twist for those of us in the West, because most of us don't come in at the wisdom factor level, and we don't come in at the ethical behavior level. We come in because we want to practice meditation. And that's kind of our foot in the door. There's more that can be said about all of these factors. It's a big topic that we can't cover tonight. But I do want to talk a little bit about the relationships. So one of the reasons that the conventional wisdom is we begin with ethical behavior is because it supports us in meditation. When our ethical behavior is cleaned up, meditation is easier to practice. And one clue to that, if you look at what happens to your mind in meditation, if you're like many people, you'll find that the mind wanders, and the mind has a lot of active thinking that may not be what you were planning on. And if you examine the thinking closely, what you'll see is that a lot of it is about your ethical behavior or lack thereof. So we'll find that maybe we're rationalizing our behavior. We're replaying an encounter with somebody, and we're trying to convince ourselves that even though our behavior wasn't perfect, it was justified. Maybe we're judging others as a way of convincing ourselves our action was justified. Or maybe we're judging ourselves and nurturing guilt about our actions. As we tell these stories to ourselves over and over, we tell them unconsciously, and we tell them endlessly. They get a little tedious when we start to pay attention to them. So with the amount of mental real estate that these stories are occupying, it's a miracle we can get any amount of meditation in our lives. But as we practice ethical behavior, as we refine our ethical behavior, there are fewer and fewer situations where we are telling these stories to ourselves. And what the result is a more calm and relaxed mind, a more concentrated mind. So the ethical behavior supports us in our meditation practice and the 3 mind training factors. And as I said, this is where most of us enter the path. Maybe that we don't say this often enough. More attention on ethical behavior might be one way to help us strengthen our meditation practice. Then as we strengthen our meditation practice, we move on to the wisdom factors or insight. And they're a little different from the other path factors in that we can sit down and say, I'm going to practice my concentration now, or I'm going to practice my mindfulness, or I'm going to practice right speech now. But what we can't do is say, well, I'm going to have an insight now, or I'm going to achieve wisdom now. That's not within our control. So these path factors of the wisdom factors are different in nature. And they're a little mysterious. They arrive on their own schedule. Sometimes they don't arrive, even though we're practicing diligently for long periods of time. But that's out of our control. Our job is just to prepare our minds through meditation and be available and surrender to the mystery of how insight or wisdom works. I want to make one more comment about the wisdom factors, and that is that I use the word mysterious, and I use that word on purpose. I take that word to mean that there are lawful cause and effect relationships that determine what is happening, but we don't necessarily understand that cause and effect relationship. Until we're fully awakened, we abide with some amount of ignorance and we can't see clearly. Now, the alternative, another way to understand that is that there's something magical going on. And my understanding of magical is there is no lawful cause and effect relationship. Things just happen. And I don't think that's true on this path. I think that magical thinking is not useful, but acknowledging the mystery is critical because a lot of this is mysterious, but not magical. So in just kind of wrapping up, I want to say that we can work with these path factors, this progression that I showed in the first model, the 4 quadrants. Our progress on the path won't be neat and clean. In other words, we might find that we're in one quadrant for our efforts to practice right speech, and another quadrant for right effort, and another quadrant for right view, and they'll move around. So I think this can be a useful tool if we will keep in mind that these path factors, we move at different paces with different factors. And sometimes even within a path factor, there'll be differences. I might find that I'm doing great with my right speech, except when my older sister is around, and all of a sudden my right speech is not as strong as it used to be. Maybe I moved a quadrant around. So I think it can be helpful to parse out the different experiences we have and look at them individually, not just progress on the path. The goal of this undertaking is for us to live a harmless life and a life of ease. And with time, our movement in this direction is inevitable. And I want to close with a quote. I've used this before. Some of you are familiar with it, but I think it fits well. So this is from Bhikkhu Bodhi, a Theravadan monk, his book, The Noble Eightfold Path. He says, liberation is the inevitable fruit of the path and is bound to blossom forth when there is steady and persistent practice. The only requirements for reaching the final goal are two: start and to continue. If these requirements are met, there is no doubt the goal will be attained. So I'll offer that for your consideration. And if anybody wants to share a thought or a question, you can use the chat function. And until somebody does, we can sit quietly. We know how to do that. We're meditators. So here's a question. I think this is shared privately, so it may not be visible to everybody. The comment is, I think randomness rules the world. Do you agree? I don't know about that. No, I think cause and effect rules the world. There may be exceptions, but generally it feels to me like the things that feel random to me are not because cause and effect is not operating. It is because I don't understand how cause and effect is operating. And until I'm fully awakened, I'll probably not understand everything about how cause and effect operates. Not to imply I'm going to be fully awakened, unless I'm fully awakened, I should say it that way. So here's a question that is, would quadrant number 2 be a stream entrant? So many of you are familiar with the 4 stages of awakening. And the first stage of awakening is stream entry. I'm going to respond to that. I'm going to dodge that question. In one sense, yes, someone has entered into the path. As I understand it, stream entry is a more progressed state than that. If we can believe the traditional teachings, once one achieves this level, stream entry, and the first 3 fetters are abandoned, then one cannot fail to move through to awakening within the next 7 lifetimes. Now, if you embrace rebirth, that might be meaningful to you. If you don't embrace rebirth, it might not. I don't think embracing rebirth is essential for this path to be really useful. So I'm going to say, I don't think quadrant number 2 would be stream entry, because I think stream entry is a higher accomplishment than just beginning on the path. But it's a great question. Thank you for asking. So here's a question. What role does the middle way play in Buddhism? So many of you know that the middle way, the Buddha had a youth that was involved in great luxury, and then he had a period of time when he was an ascetic. So those were the 2 ends of the spectrum, and one of his discoveries was the middle way, neither of those 2 indulgences it was the right path. That was what led to his awakening. And so the question is, what role does the middle way play in Buddhism? I think it is the way of the Buddha's teachings. And that would probably be a great topic for an entire evening's talk. So I'm just going to leave it with, I think it is central to what the Buddha taught. Okay, so here's a question. Are there other motivations besides the end goal to keep our energy up and turn the corners to go through the 2nd and 3rd quadrants? I don't know that this is universally true, but I think there's an element of when we don't keep our energy up and we fall away, which is a normal progression. It's not linear. We take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I use that term. I think one of the things that motivates us is seeing the pain when we fall away, seeing the difficulty and the futility of living the way we fall back into. And before we ever have a glimpse of this path, living in that way kind of seems okay. It's kind of normal and it's what people around us are doing. But once we get a taste of the liberation that can be achieved from pursuing this path, I think that is a big incentive. It's not to say you'll never slip back, but I think there's an element of self-correcting to it, because when we slip back, it's that much more uncomfortable. Okay, and I'm going to take one more question. I had not thought about the distractions coming up in my meditation practice might be a sign I would need to look at my behavior. Would that be right? Probably not always. Certainly we have distractions that aren't arising from unskillful behavior. I can speak for myself. The closer I look, the more I see how when I do something unskillful, it follows me around for a much, much longer time period than I ever suspected. And so I find myself ruminating about it. Ruminating about anything interferes with present moment awareness, being mindful of this moment of experience. And so I don't want to say it's all of the distracting thoughts are about unskillful behavior. What I want to say is investigate that. Look at that for yourself and see if there is some element of truth to that. Sounds like the baked potatoes are ready. Okay, so we will move on. Thank you for your questions. I hope the answers are in some way useful. I'll cover a few announcements now. We're having a series this summer. It's Sutta Summer, and so we'll be covering suttas, teachings of the Buddhas. And this will be from May 27th, beginning on May 27th, and then going June 3rd, June 10th, June 17th, and 24th. So that'll be 5 Wednesdays, and each of the 5 Dharma leaders will be speaking on a sutta that is one of their favorites and kind of unpacking it and looking at it. I hope you'll join us. That should be a lot of fun. You may know that the annual picnic that was scheduled for this weekend, May 24th, has been canceled. Don't go to Freedom Park on Saturday. You can go to Freedom Park. Don't expect the Sangha to be there. The summer book discussion group is beginning. It'll be 2 Zoom sessions, June 4th and July 9th, noon to 2 p.m. This is for both beginners and experienced practitioners. Joy Libeth is the leader. The book is The Little Book of Being by Diana Winston. And Joy's contact information is on the website if you want to register for this. This is a pleasing announcement to be able to make. Beginning in June, so not a week from tonight, but 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to resume the 7 to 7:30 instruction period on Zoom. And so at that time, you'll be getting 2 links. not one for the instruction period if you want to participate, and then a second one for this regular Sangha meeting. You'll hear more about that as that time gets closer. And you probably know that we have a website, imccharlotte.org, and you can check that for other activities. This is where we would normally say there's a box in the back of the room if you would like to support this community financially, but given that we're in a Zoom environment, if you'd like to support this community financially, you can do it on the web, on our website. There's a PayPal link. There's also the mailing address if you'd prefer to mail a check. Okay, why don't we close with our metta or loving kindness meditation. So before we begin, I'll just invite anyone to bring to mind any person, any being, person or non-human, that you'd like to have held in loving kindness tonight. Hold their names in your mind. And then we'll begin our practice with loving kindness toward ourselves. I'll offer these phrases which you can repeat silently to yourself. May I be safe from inner and outer harm. May I be happy and content. May I be healthy in body and mind. And may I live a life of well-being, free from suffering. And then bringing to mind another being or beings. Could be an individual, a group, a nation, whatever feels to you like you would like to direct loving kindness energy toward. May you be safe from inner and outer harm. May you be happy and content. May you be healthy in body and mind. And may you live a life of well-being, free from suffering. And finally, broadening our loving kindness practice out to all beings everywhere. May all beings be safe from inner and outer harm. May all beings be happy and content. May all beings be healthy in body and mind. And may all beings, without exception, live lives of well-being, free from suffering. It's been a pleasure being with you. Have a great rest of your week.